Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, February 24th. Derek VanRiper here with Sarris. On this episode, we have some important news updates. Several key players have opening day statuses that are now officially up in the air. We'll talk about the implications of that from both a real and a fantasy perspective. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about some 2026 rebound candidates, looking at some of the biggest fallers in drafts so far this year compared to last year's NFBC main event, hopefully finding good bounce back targets that you can build your teams around. And then, of course, we'll continue our team preview series. Chandler joins us here in just a few minutes to break down the 2026 Astros. How's it going for you on this Tuesday? Panic mode? Yeah.
It's panic mode. I mean, I'm leaving Friday for spring training. We'll be going to the Sabre Analytics Conference this weekend, and then going to camps all the next week, and then, a little bit of respite at the end of next week, but it's still in Arizona all the way through March 8th. If you are in Arizona on this Saturday, we are going to go to the Whiny Pig this Saturday. We'll go there like 6 to 8, 6 to 9, something like that. We got to go to bed early because we're doing something early in the morning the next day. But we can talk about my LABR drafts because I'm doing AL LABR this weekend. So a lot of stuff to prepare for. Got to go get my credentials today so that I can actually get into some stadiums. And then you'll get spring training, on the pod with the sunglasses and the wind sounds and the sometimes the sprinkler going off on top of me. All sorts of fun about to happen. But I got to get ready and get all my ducks in an order.
Yeah, a lot of the beat writers are coming back from spring training for a little while before they go back out to Florida and Arizona in a couple of weeks. So we're going to have more team previews kind of spilling into next week. Got Katie Wu and Matt Gelb already lined up for Tuesday. So we'll keep sprinkling team previews in along the way, in addition to Eno's visits to camp and my trip to and from Arizona. So if the voices on the show change a little bit over the course of the next week, it's because we are all over the place. It is the busiest and best time of year, and trying to hold it all together is a challenge. No matter how many times we do it, it seems like there's always something that falls through the cracks. So we begin with some baseball news you should know. Opening day status is in the air. According to Katie Wu, Blake Snell has been limited to throwing off of flat ground so far, and his status for opening day is very much in question. And according to manager Dave Roberts, quote, "Time's ticking, but like I told him the other day, opening day is not necessarily a hard and fast target for us," end quote. So what we're seeing now, is Blake Snell starting to fall in drafts. I had my LABR draft, League of Alternative Baseball Reality. I was in the 15-team mixed league that went down on Monday night. Blake Snell fell to pick 187 overall, which I thought was a really steep discount. That was the 13th round. I was actually the one that took him. We'll talk about that draft a bit later on in the show. That's a league with IL spots. In situations like that, I don't worry as much about the vague, could miss some time to begin the season type injuries. And I think that's exactly what we're dealing with Snell. They've talked about the fatigue he's been feeling coming off of a heavy workload in October last year, but they haven't described anything in the vein of a strain, a tear, anything that's actually going to be a long-term problem. This just seems like a load management sort of thing where the Dodgers have decided that Blake Snell can be the first of their pitchers to take a little bit of a break, and his break just happens to be when the season begins. And I think people overreact to the timing of those absences, because if we were taking a very sober view of Blake Snell's year-to-year workloads, we wouldn't be projecting him for 180-plus innings anyway. So knowing that he knocks off maybe 10 or 15 innings right away at the beginning just doesn't change that much about how I feel about him.
Yeah, I think that's a viable way to think about it. I think, another way to say it is I only had 120 some odd innings projected for him. So it's like that was already baked into his cost. If you actually thought that Blake Snell could pitch 180 innings this year, then he would be like a top 15, top 10 type pitcher. So, that's always been, baked in, and I think he's probably dropping too much. Now, of course, if you're in a league where you don't have an IL, then it makes it a little bit harder. The shape of the season does matter because you're going to have him on your bench to open the season, which means you're already a little hamstrung in terms of what you can do with your bench, what you can do going forward, and that can cause some issues. So I guess I understand a little bit more if those guys are all playing NFC, with no IL slots, short benches, and then they come over and play tout and they forget, oh, I can stash this guy. And stashing is in 12 and 15 teams mono leagues, especially if the bench is somewhat short, is kind of fun because you're like, ooh, I have Snell in my back pocket, and I get to now go to the waiver wire and pick up, the flavor of the month. Maybe Kyle Leahy, just something fun that's maybe popping. And, maybe in the end I get 2 good pitchers out of this one slot. So, yeah, I think that's true. What does it mean for the rotation, I think, is also interesting because this is a team that normally does a 6-man. They're talking that Roki Sasaki is in. I just gave a couple more innings to Emmett Sheehan because it really looks like, Sheehan might be one of these guys that, he's like in the action shot where all the things are blowing up around him and he's kind of just like walking through it, I could see Sheehan kind of putting up 140, 150 innings this year, just as they need him as a rock. But if you're doing a 6-man rotation, you can put Roki in. If Snell's not ready for opening day, that leaves an opening for somebody other than that. Could River Ryan make the opening day roster, or would it be Justin Robleski? I think those are the 2 favorites for the 6-man slot, and there's something to watch in spring training. And I think one of the things you can watch, other than how they're pitching and their results, is just how many innings do they give them in their starts in the spring training? Who goes before whom in the rotation in the spring training? Who gets the next start between River Ryan and Robleski, and do they go 1 inning or do they go 2? Something as silly as that can mean something, because if they go 2, that's the Dodgers saying, no, like, we want you on track to be, 5-6 innings on opening day, or not opening day, but opening week.
Yeah, I think there's a few schedule things that could also come into play for the Dodgers to begin the season. They start with 3 at home against the Diamondbacks. They have a rare Sunday off day on the first Sunday of the regular season. Then they host the Guardians after that, an off day on that Thursday. So they don't even have 6 consecutive games until their 3rd and 4th series of the season. So they may be able to get by without even adding one of those depth starters as an actual starter until the 2nd week of April, I guess the 1st full week of April, depending on how you slice it. But either way, like, River Ryan's one of those guys that if you're looking for a blueprint for how he might be handled, I almost think the way the Yankees handled Clark Schmidt a few years ago when he was coming off major injuries and kind of finally broke through and had that chance, like, that might be the way they go, because River Ryan's already 27 years old. Like, there's not a lot of excess babying that's going to happen for someone's workload when they're that age coming off TJ.
Yeah, there's another wild card in Ben Kasparius, who I think is a good enough pitcher, like, full stop, that he will make the roster. The question is what his role is going to be. His first appearance was a 1-inning appearance that doesn't really tell us too much about his future. But if Kasparius is on the roster, he can also help you fake a 6-man by, doing 2 or 3 innings, maybe combined with Will Klein, get you through 5 innings, do basically a bullpen day. You do that once or twice, you might get through the first month.
Yeah, so Dodgers rotation depth still in a good place, even with the slow play approach they're taking with Blake Snell right now. That discount hasn't been as steep in NFBC leagues, by the way. ADP is closer to 136 over the last 7 days across all formats. So still probably about 50 picks later, maybe even more than he'd be going if he was completely healthy at this point in the season. Brandon Woodruff is in this dreaded opening day status in the air group. This is direct from Woodruff himself. It's up in the air right now. That's the whole thing, with the focus being on staying healthy over the course of the entire season. He threw a 25-pitch live batting practice session on Monday, so it's not like he's way behind. But I think this is kind of similar to Snell, where you're looking at this as a slow play, and the slight difference is we have a little more of the clear indicator of what was wrong with Woodruff. It's not just fatigue. It was an actual injury that put him on the shelf in the postseason again a year ago.
Yeah, and that's why I only have 126 innings down for Brandon Woodruff myself, and that has affected his ranking. Along with the fact that the stuff was down a little bit. So he hasn't been a must acquire for me. But I think this does put a little bit more of a lock on Logan Henderson making the opening day roster. And it may even open the door for Kyle Harrison or Robert Gasser. I do think Gasser and Harrison are ahead of Sproat, but there could be spring movement towards one of those guys being the 5 to open the season.
Yeah, I think listening a little bit to the Journal Sentinel's Brewers podcast, Todd Rosiak, who had this report that I brought up with Woodruff, made it seem as though Kyle Harrison is higher on that depth chart than you and I have anticipated so far. That Harrison might even be ahead of Logan Henderson if there was one spot for those two guys. So I don't know if that's set in stone or anything, but I just, for someone who's really close to the team on a day-to-day basis in the spring, to have that view of Harrison is making me kind of rethink how I'm ordering them right now too. It's an ongoing competition, a theme of a lot of back ends of the rotation around the league right now.
I'm fairly highly anticipating Kyle Harrison's first spring data then, because I'd be really interested to see if they can get more ride out of his cutter, if that's something that they're into, or if they just have him emphasize the cutter more than anybody has so far at any stop, and if the slurve becomes more of a sweeper with them, or I just, given his current pitch mix, I'm not super into Kyle Harrison, but I am intrigued to see what Milwaukee has up their sleeves for him.
One other wrinkle from the Brewers, the closer role might be more up in the air than we thought. I have been living my life under the assumption that a healthy Trevor McGill would remain the closer, because the Brewers for several years have leaned pretty consistently on just one closer when healthy. It kind of goes back to Hader, to Devin Williams, to Trevor McGill. And it even spans back to the time before Pat Murphy was managing the team. We've seen McGill and Abner Uribe getting drafted very close together throughout the spring, and we learned recently Trevor McGill had an off-season PRP injection, that's platelet-rich plasma, which followed some time he lost late last season with a forearm strain. We know forearm strains are often the precursors to more serious arm trouble. We talked about that in recent weeks. And Pat Murphy's quote about the bullpen didn't exactly make me feel good about my priors in thinking McGill was the guy, because Pat Murphy said, I don't feel like that at all when he was asked about the need for defined roles in the back of the bullpen. I feel like we look at the matchups and see what's best. We'll look at the health of the pitcher. You might see other guys in that mix too. So maybe a committee is brewing. Maybe they're just trying to play it close to the vest with the health of Trevor McGill, but it feels like it's a slippery situation if you're trying to figure out who's actually getting the bulk of the saves in the early part of the season for the Brewers.
At these current prices, it feels like a game of chicken. You're actually investing fairly high in a reliever that has a 50-50 chance in my mind. I do think that probably it's maybe 55-45 for Uribe, given this news about McGill's health. I'm really worried about that. It does not sound good. I would rather have Uribe, but given that statement and that they both exist, they're a little bit too expensive for me. Both of them are.
Yeah, mostly avoiding at the present time. We'll see if we get some separation in ADP, though, with that PRP news for Trevor McGill. Chris Sale has signed a 1-year extension with Atlanta. He was going to be a free agent at the end of 2026. He gets an additional year for $27 million. There's also a club option for $30 million that would cover the 2028 season. Sale's going to be 37 years old at the end of March, so the extension covers his age 38 season. Saw a note that he was touching 96 in his spring debut, so by all accounts, Chris Sale feeling good as we move through the later part of February. Are you surprised that he wanted to lock in another year right now instead of testing the open market? Or do you think his age kind of makes it easy to say, hey, $27 million is a lot of money. If I get hurt, I'm covered. Let's just get this done right now.
Yeah, it's amazing that a pitcher of his ilk and at his age has never been in free agency. So I guess it shouldn't be surprising that he decided not to go through free agency this time. He's never done it. I think he just knows where he likes to be. He knows, he values comfort. And on top of that, he's been really well paid anyway. So it's not like he's left a lot of money on the table. In terms of, what I think about, his outcomes this year, excellent when in, and I don't know who you think will get more innings between Chris Sale and Blake Snell is a viable question. Maybe it's Blake Snell. And in terms of, touching 96, I just wanted to check his max release speed last year. His max was 97 to 98. So, it'd be nice to have another gear in him, but it is really early in spring, and I remain optimistic until I hear more about his back or his hamstring or his whatever it is.
Team preview season rolls on, and it's time to talk Astros. To do that, we bring in our Astros beat writer, Chandler Rome. Chandler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So we have this thing called the Rule of Five we use. We try to identify the 5 most likely everyday players on every roster. And then, of course, from there, you can mix and match. Usually one of the spots you mix and match is catcher, and then you can platoon a couple spots. I don't think the Astros have 5 clear and obvious everyday players right now. I think there are candidates to round that out. But when I look at this team, Chandler, I see Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, and Jeremy Pena. And then, maybe you look at Carlos Correa and say when he's healthy, he's that kind of guy. But from there, I think it's a little bit of a question as to who the actual 5th guy would even be. So I'm just curious, when you look at this position player group, who do you see as just standing out as the clear and obvious foundational guys based on the way this roster was put together?
I think what you just hit on there, the way this roster was put together, right now it is not a functional roster to where there would be those 5 guys that you talked about. Like, I think within the organization, they certainly view those 4 that you mentioned, Jose Altuve, Jeremy Pena, Carlos Correa, and Yordan Alvarez. They are everyday players. Like, within the organization, they are viewed as that. This Isaac Paredes Christian Walker thing is very odd. The fact that we are now a week and a half, 2 weeks into spring training, we have started spring training games, and they're both still on the roster. That is not something that I thought would have happened before spring started. There was momentum about a week before they reported to camp that I thought Isaac Paredes was gone basically any minute, and that has since died down a little bit. He's still available, don't get me wrong. They would still very much entertain offers for him, but they've got a high price on him, as they should. He's a valuable player. He brings a lot of value to their lineup. He's one of the only guys on their roster that sees pitches. He's one of the only guys on their roster that is so pull happy. He fits so well at Dyken Park. They just have nowhere to play him because Christian Walker's making $20 million, and he's a better defensive first baseman. He's a more traditional first baseman than Isaac Paredes. So right now, Isaac Paredes is basically like your roving utility man, and I'm not sure that's what you want from a guy that's that valuable to your lineup. So I don't know who the 5th would be. I think if Isaac Paredes is traded before opening day, I think you certainly say Christian Walker is the 5th guy, or if they can find a team that would be willing to take on some money and they wouldn't have to pay down all of Christian Walker's salary, and Christian Walker's the guy that moves, then maybe it's Isaac Paredes. But yeah, their roster construction right now does not lend itself to having just 5 identifiable everyday players.
Are there any spring signs that they're just trying to maybe figure it out? Like Paredes taking, balls in the outfield, or Yordan, crewing with the outfielders more often? Is there any sort of sign where you're like, oh, that's interesting? I heard something about Cam Smith playing center. I don't, what's the corresponding idea there?
We're recording this on February 24th. Cam Smith's actually starting in center field today in their Grapefruit League game against the Mets. So that'll be the first time I think he has played center field in a actual game. Well, I get it's an exhibition, but it's the first time he plays center field in an actual game. So I think they're doing that more for like end of game flexibility. If Joe Espada has to hit for Zach Cole, if he has to hit for Jake Myers or something, and to where they can still maneuver the outfield around. But like everything I saw from Isaac Paredes while I was in camp was that he was just taking ground balls at second base behind Jose Altuve. And Joe Espada has been adamant since the winter meetings in December that Yordan Alvarez will spend the majority of his time at designated hitter. He is going to be the team's primary DH.
Altuve to the outfield?
No, Jose Altuve is going to be the primary second baseman. That has also been reiterated multiple times since December. So the only way that this could have worked is if the DH spot was a legitimate open cycle to where they could just cycle Paredes in every now and then and cycle Altuve, cycle Alvarez. That's just not how they have plans to get it done. So with Alvarez as your everyday DH and Altuve as your everyday second baseman, by the way, Altuve is not taking any fly balls in left field in spring training. Like Joe Espada has said that already. So take that maybe out of your mind now. There's no open spot for him to get regular at bats. Isaac Paredes, that is. The easy solution and what fans have been yelling about for 2 months now is just play Alvarez in the outfield. Play him in left field. Like you can DH him some, but play him in the left field. This is still a guy that's never made more than 56 starts in the outfield as a big leaguer in any season. He's not a good defensive left fielder. He can handle it at Dyken Park where they have the Crawford boxes and it's a short porch, but you don't want him out there in big ballparks. And then you get into the conundrum of you get late in a 1-run game in the 8th inning and Alvarez's spot is 6 away. Do you lift him for defense in a 1-run game behind Brian Abreu and Josh Hader? And then if they give it up and you go to the 10th inning, you've lost your best hitter. So it also puts that into effect. It's a mess. It is a mess. It is something that, quite frankly, probably should have been addressed by now. It is something that when they acquired Carlos Correa at the trade deadline last year, everyone said it from maybe day 3, because I think the first 2 days were just spent, adoring Carlos Correa, that he was back. But by day 3, everyone was like, how is this going to work in 2026? And they just kind of said, we'll kick the can down the road, and they're still doing it.
Yeah, sometimes the trade that requires you to make another trade later to work ends up being disastrous when the second deal doesn't come together the way you would hope, right? Or you just lose a ton of value when you have to just give up on a player for a lot less than you think they're worth. And that might be the path they end up having to go down with Isaac Paredes. But beyond Cam Smith in that outfield mix, they bring back Joey Loperfido in the Jesus Sanchez trade. I thought when they were trading Jesus Sanchez for Joey Loperfido, the idea was save money there and then go get an upgrade with a veteran or do something else. And maybe the something else is still coming together, but if it doesn't, how do you see the outfield playing time shaking out? Because Cam Smith seems important, but everybody else seems like they're in kind of an ongoing job battle for their role.
It's, I think you put it so well, Derek. Like when they made that trade, Jesus Sanchez is making $6.8 million. Joey Loperfido is making the league minimum. Every Astros fan loves Joey Loperfido because he was a fan favorite before he got traded in the Kikuchi deal. Because he is a fan favorite, everyone didn't view it as a salary dump, but this was a salary dump. This was nothing more than getting his money off the books. And it was interesting when Dana Brown made the deal, he announced it to the beat writers in West Palm Beach before a workout and made it a point to say, we're not done yet. We are not done. He said it twice. And now about 12 days later, they still have this kind of unsettled mess out there. You're totally right that if you're going, it was a sensible move to get rid of Jesus Sanchez. He was unplayable toward the end of last year, making way too much money. You swapped essentially a 4th outfielder for a 4th outfielder and got him on a cheaper 4th outfielder. But it only makes sense if there's another move coming, if you reinvest that $7 million that you saved. And as of now, there hasn't been. And so what it leaves a ton of inexperience. And here's a number that I think will help accentuate it. Zach Cole, Cam Smith, and Joey Loperfido, 3 guys that probably have the inside track to making the opening day roster. They've taken a total of 911 Major League plate appearances. Jesus Sanchez has taken 1,681 career plate appearances against right-handed pitching. It just goes to show you how inexperienced all these guys are. And look, maybe Cam Smith actualizes the hype and the potential that everyone thought he had last year. And if that happens, a lot of these concerns go away. They like Zach Cole a lot. They think if he can eliminate the swing and miss, they think if as he gets adjusted to big league life, they think he can be a contributor. The upside's there. He's athletic. He's fast. Hits left-handed. But if those two guys don't hit, literally and figuratively, it's a real problem out there. And it's probably profiles as one of the weakest outfields in baseball. And it's one that is begging for an upgrade. And it's why they have made Isaac Paredes available for as long as they have. They are seeking an outfield upgrade, and none is manifested yet. And so they're rolling into Grapefruit League play with, look, these aren't kids. Joey Loperfido is like 27 years old. Zach Cole's 25. Cam's a kid. Cam's 23. But, they're rolling in with a lot of inexperienced guys that haven't done it at the major league level. And again, if they develop and they play well and they're allowed to get better. So if they get better, then the problem goes away. But right now it's a dangerous game that they're playing.
Seems to me like Cam Smith has a role that he's on the opening day roster. I know they said he needs to earn it, but I bet you that's just manager speak for, have a good spring, kid, like make me look good, as opposed to, because I don't, there's untested and there's untested. At least Cam Smith has basically played a major league season.
I think it was what Dana Brown said at the GM meetings. I think he certainly at the time may have thought that he would have another outfielder in here by now and there would be some competition really for Cam Smith, but he doesn't have any competition. Taylor Trammell's a non-roster guy in camp, left-handed hitting, has some big league experience. He's the closest thing that they have to competition here. Cam's all but guaranteed a spot, barring him just falling flat on his face in spring training, which I don't think will happen. So yeah, it's a really dangerous gamble they're waging here.
What do you think's happening at the back end of the rotation? It looks pretty settled with Brown, Javier, Imai, and Burrows. They, all to various extents, veterans that have proven track records. But, Lance McCullers seems to be talking about retirement already, or at least he's saying weird things about his health again. Then you got Spencer Getty, Ryan Weiss. How do you see that back end shaking up?
I think coming into camp, Spencer Arrighetti and Lance McCullers probably have the inherent leg up, just given their track records, given this is the last year of McCullers' contract. He's owed $18 million for everything he has done for the franchise, for what he means to them. I think he is at the very least afforded one last chance to figure it out. So I think as of right now, those would probably be the guys I would say. But look, they went out this offseason and they added all this depth for competition. Ryan Weiss wants to start.
Are you suggesting they're going to do a 6-man?
Oh, no, they're starting with a 6-man.
I hadn't heard that. All right.
Yeah, they're going to start.
For Imai and just in general?
Well, they played 26 games in 28 days to start the season. And that, coupled with Tetsuya Imai coming over from NPB, they're going to start in a 6-man rotation. So I would imagine that Arrighetti and McCullers get the last 2 spots, but that is nowhere near set in stone. The McCullers thing, yeah, I think if you watched or heard or read any of what he said in camp a couple of weeks ago, he certainly has come to terms with this being it for him. Didn't announce his retirement by any means, but this is the last year of his contract. And said he is basically at peace with whatever happens after. He said he's not going out there this year with this thought that I have to pitch well to get a job. He is perfectly content with what he's done. He's made $100 million in his career. He's a legend in the Astros organization, whether he ever throws another pitch again. So I think he will be, just because of who he is, I think he'll be afforded a chance coming out of camp, presuming he's healthy. I think you look at Ryan Weiss, he's certainly a guy that could contend for something. AJ Bluebaugh is a prospect that, broke out last year, ended the year on a 22-inning scoreless streak in the big leagues. I think they like him a little more out of the bullpen as a swingman, kind of a long reliever type hybrid, which they'll need to start the year when you're in a 6-man rotation and a shorthanded bullpen. They've got Nate Pearson, former top prospect with the Blue Jays, that they're going to stretch him out and be a starter. So they've got options, but I think as we're talking right now, I'd probably say Arrighetti and McCullers have the legs up to get that 5th and 6th spots.
Yeah, it just feels like another area, kind of like the outfield. The back of that rotation might have some ongoing competition, some churn over the course of the year. What's the level of concern right now with Josh Hader, given what's happened over the course of the offseason with him and what he's been able to do in the early weeks here of spring training?
I think they're not projecting any like panic. They're not projecting any worry. I think it'd be a little more worrisome if his arm wasn't moving. He is still playing catch. He is, he's not off a mound yet. He's still off a flat ground, but he is never, they had to shut him down for about 10 days when he felt the bicep soreness. But coincidentally, his first day after that 10-day shutdown of throwing was the first pitchers and catchers workout. So he really has been throwing all spring. It just hasn't been off a mound. It hasn't been with much intensity. I would be surprised if he's on the opening day roster. I'd be surprised if he's ready for opening day. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to rush him, especially with the money that they have invested in him, with what he ended last year with his shoulder injury. Josh has said that he thinks the two things are independent. He does not think that the shoulder led to this. He thinks it's two independent entities. The doctors that he saw confirmed that to him. So I don't think long term there's much concern, but I mean, you kind of look at it. This is a guy that, he missed the last 48 games last year with the shoulder, and now he's got a bicep thing. Like, you can't help but not worry. But I don't think it's one of these things where they're trying to put lipstick on a pig and this is like, worse than they're letting on. I really do think they think this is minor. I think Josh has said that he thinks it's minor, but I would not count on him to be on the opening day roster.
It kind of feels like they're playing a little more of the long game there, trying to make sure that he's just 100% when he comes back. And if it's late April, early May, whatever, then he's good to go, hopefully, from that point on. And as we saw last year, Brian Abreu, a very capable fill-in as a closer, temporarily at least, in Houston. The Pacoda win total projection for this team, Chandler, comes in at 84.6. We've been grading these on the old Goldilocks porridge scale. 84.6, is that too hot, too cold, or just right for these Astros?
Okay, yeah, I think it's too cold. This team won 87 games last year with like being the most injured team in the sport. Yordan Alvarez barely played. Jeremy Pena barely played toward the end. Jose Altuve had one of the worst years of his career offensively. They didn't have Carlos Correa until the final 2 months of the year. I don't think we can discount like the presence that Carlos Correa has, and just his being there means something and makes a difference. And, I'm a little more bullish on this rotation than I think some are. I think if they get Christian Javier back to 2022 Christian Javier, I think that's certainly an X factor that they could have like a top half of the league rotation if they can get him back there. You know, I probably, I don't, if you're asking me for a number, I'd take the over on 84.5, but I'd probably say where they were last year. I like 87, 88, 89 wins. Like, cause again, I think if they keep these guys upright, I think if they can keep Yordan Alvarez upright and they keep the rotation upright, which with all their injuries last year, they did a good job of keeping Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez upright. If they can do that with Brown and Javier and Imai, like I think this is a team that could flirt with 90 wins just because they did it last year with being one of the most injured teams in baseball.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, there's still a lot of talent on this roster, and I think that they did a pretty savvy move with Imai. I think he's going to be a little better than the market thought he was going to be with that deal. And I think I'm actually really excited about Cam Smith. I don't know. I see everything that needs to be there. In terms of an athlete, he runs fast, he throws the ball hard, he's twists his body hard. Like he's got good bat speed. He's and I think even in terms of what he did on the field last year for a first attempt, that was decent, and it could totally presage like a breakout this year. So for me, a Cam Smith breakout and Imai being better than the market says is enough actually to just be the reason why they don't win 84 wins. They don't have 84 wins. They have 87. You know what I mean? Like those two guys being better than people expect is enough for me, because the other guys, a lot of them are just really easily projectable. You know what you're going to get from Pena, Altuve, Correa, and Alvarez, to some extent. So I think they're the kind of X factors for this team.
Yeah. And I mean, I just keep reiterating, like, Yordan Alvarez played 48 games last year. Like, I don't know if people forget. I know in our bubble people don't, but I don't know if the general public just, like, like, this is a top 5 hitter in baseball. Like, when he is on and when he is healthy, like, he is, like, in the Judge Ohtani echelon of.
He like strikes out less than those guys. So this is a guy who could be the best hitter in baseball, Maybe it's only for a stretch or two because of the health, but like he strikes out less than Judge and Ohtani, and he has just as much raw power, and he hits it out to every field. He's one of my favorite hitters to watch. I think he can take a hitter out to any part of the ballpark, and he always has a good sense of what's happening. And in terms of opposite field power, I think he may be number one.
Yeah, and my confidence in them, again, like, he needs to stay upright and stay healthy, but my confidence in them exceeding that win total is just like, they won 87 games last year with him not a factor at all. And I just
and they made some changes in the training staff and stuff, right?
Yeah, so they parted ways with their longtime head athletic trainer. Now, I will say they just promoted his assistant to be the head guy, but they have a new strength coach now. Apparently, that was not due to what happened last year. The old strength coach got a job closer to home, so they at least have a new perspective. They have new eyes. They have some fresher kind of thoughts on what's going on. They claimed all offseason that they did all these audits and that they looked into it. They won't tell us what they found, if anything. But yeah.
Everything's fine, but we won't tell you what you found.
Correct. But like, they're trying to do some noticeable stuff, like in spring training, like they're starting later. Like, you're not seeing like the older guys like doing some stuff that you would have seen them do in the past. Like, they're all on different progressions and programs. Like, you can tell it's like things that are very specifically tailored to certain guys instead of maybe a uniform way of doing things. So maybe that's something a little bit different, but yeah, they undertook that whole audit, and who knows, maybe it'll help. But that's the thing. If they can stay upright, then I think this is like an 87-90 win team.
Yeah, and to your point on Yordan Alvarez, you take a look at the last 5 regular seasons combined, just sort the leaderboard by WRC+. It's Aaron Judge with a ridiculous 193, Shohei Ohtani with a 165, and Yordan Alvarez right there tied with Juan Soto with a 160. He's a top-end impact hitter, and just having him even for 130 games this year would make a huge difference over what we saw a season ago. Chandler, we appreciate your time and your insight as always. Look forward to catching up with you again later on this season.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get to a bigger picture topic. Looking for some rebound candidates. We're going to focus on hitters today, and the method for this one was pretty simple. I took a look back at the ADP reports from last spring, the 2025 NFBC main event, and looked at that compared to what we've seen in all of the drafts that are going down on the NFBC platform this February, just looking for the biggest gaps between where guys were going last year and where they're going now. Searching for fallers and trying to identify some rebound candidates along the way. I think it's been a moment or two since we've dug into Mookie Betts, and by all accounts, he is much healthier now than he was this time a year ago. Looking back at what he's done in the last 3 seasons, you go back to 2023, he was a $37 player in the Fangraphs Player Rater that year, but he clocked in at $17 in 2024 and $16.50, despite losing a lot of weight and dealing with that mysterious illness last spring. Where do we go from here? Because this time last year, Mookie Betts was kind of an early second-round pick until that ailment kind of came up and maybe knocked him down a couple spots. This year, he is going outside the top 50 overall. Pick 56 has been the February ADP. So a late 4th rounder in a 15-team league, kind of a late 5th rounder if we're talking about a 12-teamer. Do you like Betts at that price as a clear and obvious sort of rebound candidate?
I mean, one thing that I like is that I think the floor is decent. I mean, you can see that even with the poor seasons, he's been nearly a $20 player. And if I just said to you, hey, would you like to have like a 275 2010 shortstop, you can say, okay, all right, I can handle that. That's basically what he's projected for. Now, some of the projections say more like 24 homers, and his career batting average is 290. So if he does have a little bit of a late career resurgence, then how about a 270 2010 shortstop that could hit 300 and hit 25 homers and steal 15 bags? Now you're talking about a $25 player. So I don't think he's going to get all the way back to, a first-round player. First-round players are $30 plus, But I think he is somebody that's going later on that could still return you, late second, early third-round status. And it's just one thing, like this is a future Hall of Famer, and he's only 33. So it's not like asking, Paul Goldschmidt to come out and, hit 30 dongs this year. It's more like, could we have one of those? You see this all the time. You've seen it a couple of times in Nolan Arenado's career where like you thought he was in a real decline and then boom, good season, So I think this is sometimes like Hall of Famers, and this is a little bit of psychology here, but I think sometimes Hall of Famers get to this point in their careers where they're like, oh man, this is 2 straight bad years. This isn't good enough. Like I need to spend all offseason bulking up or bat speeding up or whatever it is that he spent his time doing. In fairness, he's also, in these last 2 years, he spent a lot of time working on his defense to be a shortstop, So, if I was in Mookie's head right now, I'd probably be saying I was not good offensively. I was not up to my standards offensively last year, and I'm going to spend the offseason thinking about offense.
Yeah, I was looking at other players that go after him that have been $15 hitters or better in each of the last 2 seasons. And it's actually a pretty short list. There's only 16 hitters that I have ranked behind Mookie Betts that have been that valuable in each of the last 2 seasons. Like, it's just hard to stay healthy and be good. It's actually kind of a rare trait. So I wonder if some of the, I guess, correction for some folks is going a step too far. That's basically the underlying question with all of this. Like, sure, the value is down relative to last year, but did the market overcorrect? I think with the auction calculator running ATC through it, you get a $21 value roughly on Mookie Betts, so better than the last 2 seasons, and that would make him, for me, an easy top 40 sort of hitter. So I do like him where he's going right now, but I think the shape of what he's going to give you is a fair question to ask. Like, how much power versus how much speed? Like, the runs are going to be there, the RBIs are going to be there. I think the batting average is at least going to be good if it's not great, and that alone gives him such a good floor.
Yeah, the ATC projection is really close to what he did last year. So, you're just asking for him to rededicate himself to finding his power swing or, find something in that swing. I mean, this is a guy who has a 136 career WRC plus that until last year hadn't been worse than 31% above league average for 7 straight years. So to go from that level down to a 104 WRC plus suggests that alone suggests that he can get back up to 25-30% better than league average. I remain pretty upbeat about him. I think of the names that we'll talk about today, Mookie Betts is my favorite.
Yeah, and I think he's got the longest track record of the highest level of performance too of the bunch. Everybody else has taken a different sort of path, or is even maybe still someone we're hoping to see their best possible big league season from. Jarren Duran comes up a lot on our show. I think the last time we talked about him, it might have been with Jed, the suggestion was that Jarren Duran might be stuck between 2 different approaches. And I was not in at all last year when the ADP was up in the 20s. This year he's down in the 70s. What I'm finding is for a lot of teams that I build, I don't want outfielders in the first 4 rounds or so. And then someone like Jarren Duran kind of stands out to me as a player that can give me something in every category. He can be at least average, if not better than average, across the board in all 5 categories. So I'm looking at him as maybe like a repeat of last year being actually enough. If he hits 16 homers, steals 24 bases again, does it with a 256 average, like that's probably okay at pick 70 because the Red Sox are going to score a lot of runs and Jarren Duran's going to prop up your counting stats while doing that. And there's always the possibility that he could run a little bit more or get to a little bit more power if he tweaks his game a little bit.
it's not possible to have like a top 5 player at every position. Like you're just not going to come out of a draft with that. And if you are, then you've spent all your money in an auction and you have no money for pitching. But, last year, Jarren Duran was the 19th best outfielder by the Player Rater. And so, that doesn't sound amazing to have as your first outfielder, but let's say you take him and say a Suzuki or something, and then you have, this is what I do with pitching sometimes is, oh man, I missed a tier, or I'm at the bottom of this tier. Well, then I'm going to double tap and try to get 2, So let's say I get Duran, and I think he's the 17th or 18th best outfielder, and I get Suzuki, and I think he's the 20th best outfielder. Well, now I have 2 top 24 outfielders, Now I have 2 top 30 outfielders, so I'm actually not that far off of average. I just don't have any top 15 outfielders. So I think this is a fine place for him to go. I think that 20 steals is a lock, 15 homers is a lock. With his strikeout rate, he should have an above average fantasy batting average. So he's comfortably good in every way. And I think that if there is a bounce back, it has to do with his power, and he accesses a little bit more of that power and gets to 25 homers or something. Not at all impossible. He's a bit of a late bloomer at 29. You'd say traditionally he's post peak among most baseball research is 26, 27. However, I do wonder if certain player types have different peaks. If you're a late debut, do you have a later peak? Is there something going on with that? I know that bodies age at different rates. He still looks like he runs fast, swings the bat fast, throws the ball hard. Like the athleticism is still there. So, there's still a chance for, I don't know. 2024 seems like a peak season maybe for him, but could you have more power than he had that year? In 2024, Duran had 21 homers. Could he have 25? Yeah, he could do a season like that. I don't know if he'll get back to 34 stolen bases, but like a 25-25 season, wouldn't be crazy. And he costs less now. I think that's my thing is I like shopping in this group. They're all people who've done it before that cost less now. That's a pretty good. The next one though is interesting. It reminds me a little bit. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Is always projected to do better than he did last year, I feel like.
Yeah. And it's even when he's really good. I think there was probably the Dunedin year coming off of that. He probably wasn't projected to top those numbers.
But I made this list here of biggest projected bounce backs, and I cut it off at 10, and I'm so glad I cut it off at 10 because 11 is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. again. And that ain't no bounce back. But here, if you're looking at on YouTube right now, you see biggest projected bounce backs. This is using the Bat X and just looking at projected WRC plus for this year compared to last year. Atop the list is Oneil Cruz. It's a little bit more of a breakout projection than a bounce back projection. But you got Brenton Doyle and Matt McClain. There's some injury aspects there. Joey Ortiz, our man, is still not projected for a great WRC plus. So I don't know how fantasy relevant that one is, but Teoscar Hernandez, more of a veteran bounce back. That's their traditional bounce back idea. Jonathan India, I think, had some injury last year. Lars Nootbaar is currently injured. He's hobbled around on a heel that he had surgically repaired, but that's a nice projected bounce back. Simeon that's a veteran bounce back right there. And then Harris and Betts round out the top 10. So all these guys are projected to have at least a WRC plus that's 15 points or higher, better than last year. Oneil Cruz, nearly 30 points. Is that a projected bounce back or is that a projected breakout? How do you see that for a 27-year-old Oneil Cruz?
I mean, we saw a $16 season in 2024. So projections push him in like the $13, $14 range, depending on your settings. So it's a little more of a bounce back than a breakout. I think the batting average downside is being exaggerated a little bit because everything that could go wrong. The bottom end outcome happened last year. What do you get, 200 even last year? And he hits the ball so hard and he runs so well that you can't really imagine a scenario, barring another injury or somehow an uptick in strikeout rate, where the average is that bad again. Projections all nudge that back into a pretty healthy, like 235 plus range. So 240 to 250 doesn't seem outlandish at all in that category. And that doesn't hurt you. There's very few leagues where a 240 hitter that does what Oneil Cruz can do in terms of power and speed is going to work against you. So you're talking about a 70 pick drop basically from where he was going. His main event ADP last year was pick 30. People were taking him at that 2-3 turn and feeling good about it, I think, generally. Now he's going right around pick 100, 99 to be exact. So that's a steep drop for a guy that still hits the ball hard. 17.9% barrel rate. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You look at the last 2 seasons combined, this is kind of eye-opening. I don't know if this says more about Oneil Cruz or the other player that's linked to him. I was just looking for guys that have 40 or more homers and 60 or more steals in the last 2 seasons combined. That's a really short list of players, right? There's 9 guys in that group, and Oneil Cruz is easily the least expensive on draft day. The next closest is Pete Crow Armstrong. Pete Crow Armstrong, same number of home runs the last 2 seasons, 41. Only 2 more stolen bases than Oneil Cruz during that span. Batting average difference, 243 to 231, favoring PCA.
Similar profile, too, like very erratic batting average. Like, you know, maybe Crow Armstrong's the guy who hits 200 this year.
I mean, it's in that range of outcomes. Like, I feel like it's hard to even call that for anyone, but I think it's possible. And I think when a profile like this pops and goes where Oneil Cruz was going last year and where PCA is going right now, that's when I start to get skeptical. When they fall and they're going 60, 70 picks later than that, I think that's when I'm interested. I think it's a good target. So we know there's platoon risk as the Pirates lineup gets better. They got a bunch of lefties in it. You know, they can't platoon everybody defensively. We need to see if you can get more comfortable in center field to sort of push away those concerns. It's not an apples to apples, like perfect across the board comparison to PCA, but I think in terms of their approach and some of their shortcomings as hitters, I think you do see some similarities there. And I think you'd say Oneil Cruz's batted ball data is a lot more convincing than PCA's. So I would much rather, you know, we draft this, not that. If I'm going to take a risky profile in the early rounds for a foundational outfielder, I'd rather just wait it out and take Cruz than go to sticker price on PCA right now.
Yeah, I think I agree. You know, although looking at this, one thing that surprises me is that Pete Crow Armstrong strikes out 24% of the time with a 16% swinging strike rate. Oneil Cruz strikes out 32% of the time with a 13% swinging strike rate. And, you know, so I think I'm right to say that they both have similar swing and miss issues, but Pete Crow Armstrong has decided to just be, you know, aggressive in the zone, strike out less, walk less, where Oneil Cruz has, you know, been a little bit more selective. I guess there's a question of what your taste is in these facts. And one thing I would point out for Oneil Cruz is, although his walk rate has fluctuated, if you look at his zone swing minus his chase rate, it's the same every year. It's around 30% every year. He's just shifted that around. Last year he chased less, but he also just swung less and swung in the zone less. So I wonder if an aggressive year at the plate might be what's, you know, could unlock some of Oneil Cruz's best outcomes.
We're probably not wrong to question whether the Pirates can actually get that out of him. You know, they've had him this whole time, and it's still been a flaw in that profile. But I also think if you do not like the extreme chasers, PCA is an extreme chaser. Oneil Cruz is not an extreme chaser, right? He's more like a 30% O swing guy. PCA runs up in the mid-40s in that metric. So I'm still in on Cruz. I mean, I don't think I had him anywhere at price last year, and I'll have a few teams with Oneil Cruz on him this year. Teoscar Hernandez is a guy that I don't think I had on many teams or any teams last year. ADP got up into the top 60 overall at 56. He's down about 70 spots right now in February. So a nice opportunity for a bounce back there. I don't really think there's a major threat to his playing time. We obviously love the Dodgers lineup from a counting stats perspective, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Teoscar Hernandez was a little bit banged up last year and played through it.
Yeah, it was the worst plate appearance total in 3 years for Teoscar Hernandez. I also like when you're taking a guy, it's a little bit like the Mookie Betts situation where you're taking a guy where he was worth last year. And so if he just turns in another year like last year, then you're paying price. But if he does bounce back at all, you're getting some upward mobility there. Teoscar was still a $15 player in the first half last year, a $13 player for the season. Yes, I think he faded in the second half due to some injury. He was still the 36th best outfielder, and he was the 117th best batter on the year. He's going at 124. That's maybe a little bit ahead of 117 because that's his overall rank. His batter rank was 88, so he's basically going where he ended up last year. And so you just want him this year to play a little bit more, maybe steal a couple more bases, hit the ball a little bit harder so you can have those better, average outcomes. Maybe just get a little luckier. This is a guy with the 325 career batting average on balls in play, Teoscar, and he's got a 283 last year. I mean, he had what is that? That's crazy. He hits the ball so hard. 5 straight years with a batting average on balls in play over 335. So, yeah, I mean, yes, the end comes for everybody, but it doesn't always come like a cliff. He could easily, bounce back a little bit, and then next year he's overpriced. You know what I mean? It is nearing the end of his career, but it doesn't look like the end. He was still above league average at the plate last year, and he's still going to get the playing time.
The injury last year was a groin injury that he mostly played through, and that seemed to sap him. He got a little heavier too. Fabian Ardaya wrote a good story about the changes that Teoscar Hernandez made trying to bounce back, moving over from right field to left field too with the addition of Kyle Tucker. So going back to the more familiar defensive corner this year, maybe that helps a little bit as well. But there's still 2 years left on the 3-year deal he signed before 2025. So I think he's going to have every opportunity to bounce back. I kind of like him, especially in my weight for outfielder builds where I'm a little light on power. That was not the case on my LABR team, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. One other name that kind of jumped off the page, I just forgot he was going this early. Matt McLain had an ADP in the main event last year of 81. Is that real? Was that actually happening? Did I do the search wrong? That just surprised me that people were drafting him that aggressively a year ago, because I was not. I liked Matt McLain a lot as a player, but I felt like maybe there was just too much being put on him coming off of basically a lost 2024 season.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm fully in on this one. He fails the test that we've put up so far, which is that Matt McLain last year was the 243rd best batter, and he's still going in the top 200 now. So you're not paying for last year. You're paying for the bounce back. I guess one difference between Matt McLain and who we talked about so far is he's 26. So he's not an older player that you're asking to bounce back. I guess, Oneil Cruz is not old, but, this is more, you're hoping that there's a level that Matt McLain could put together that he hasn't yet. I think that's fair, given that even his best season in 2023, Matt McLain had 3 wins, but he only got to the plate 403 times. So what you're saying is, could we do something like 2023, which he's already done? It was only, a couple years ago. And can we do that for a full season? If Matt McLain did just what he did in his rookie season for a full season, you would get something like 24 homers, 22 steals, and a 290 average. But that 290 average just seems like such a mirage to me. So, I think if you're buying him where he's going right now, you're hoping for 250, 260, 20 homers, 20 steals. All possible and in his peak season, so I get it. But I don't have that many shares of him right now, because you're not buying at the floor. You're kind of buying somewhere north of that.
Yeah, I think the thing that's amazing is that despite the absence in 2024, the power and speed were still there. The slash line was atrocious. I just think maybe after our conversation with C. Trent Rosecrans, McLain's pretty important to this Reds team. Defensively, fits in really well at second base, could be plus up the middle for them. Maybe some of this is just knocking the rust off was last year, and kind of getting back to the guy he was in 2023 is something we'll see. Even if he splits the difference, if he gets halfway back from where he was in 2023 and comparing to what he did last season, that'd be a pretty solid player in that ballpark. So it's late enough, going around pick 200 right now, where I think it's fine. There's a few other second basemen that I keep ending up with. I got my first share of Jorge Polanco, I believe, in the LABR draft. That was not by design.
He was like basically free. Was that near the end?
Yeah, it was after McLean, I think. I mean, it was just in that pocket of, I need someone that's going to play every day when they're not on the IL that actually brings pretty intriguing skills. I think McLean brings a bit more than some of the veterans that go after him. So I think that's why you're still getting him in that pick 200 range if you have to take that flyer. The other interesting guys that I saw on the report, I'll throw these in Discord because we're not going to talk about all of them in great detail. They've come up on the position previews throughout. I thought it was weird that Wilson Contreras has about a 100 pick drop off of his ADP from last year since he doesn't have catcher eligibility anymore. Feels like a slight overcorrection, especially based on where he's expected to hit in that Red Sox lineup. And as we've talked about before, just how good of a home park he's going to be hitting in now with the move into Fenway.
Yeah, I think that the playing time is the key here. There's been a few guys like him in Durbin that I look at the playing time projections and I just don't get them. I guess, there has been injury for Contreras, but if you think about some of the injuries that Contreras has had in the past, some of them are just catching related. Remember they put him too far forward in the box and, a swing broke his forearm. Like I think that his previous playing time is colored by the fact that he was a catcher for most of that. Why couldn't he do 620 plate appearances? I know it'd be the first time ever, but, he hasn't been a first baseman that long. If he does 620 plate appearances, then he's better than any projection has him. He probably gets to 25 homers. He probably, clears 80 runs and 80 RBI both. He probably has 5 or 6 stolen bases. If you prorate out his projections, you're going to get to where his ADP is now, I think, or you're going to get past it. You're going to think he's a good deal. So he's a good one, and then William Contreras, his ADP is down. Last year it was 27. This year it's 50. That's like a fairly modest drop. But I think that's because the drafts that are happening right now are 2 catcher leagues. But B, people can see something like this graph that I put up, which is we all know that he had a finger injury last year. We all know that he slugged a little better at the end of last year. And if you look at this graph, you can see he didn't quite get his bat speed all the way back to 2024 levels, but late in the season, he did recover a lot of it. And he was back to being an above average bat, on the field. And I think this is a Brewers team where people see there's a chance that he gets DH at bats again. And when you look at something like, hey, let's look at the BAT-X projections for the Brewers and order them in terms of just WRC+. Oh, look at that. He's number 1. So do you think that that's a guy you want to give more play time to? And for those that say, the catcher is deep and this and that, I would say ask yourself how many guys could get to 600 plate appearances as catchers. And if you do that, I'm doing this for the BAT-X across the league now, and I'm saying all teams, who are you giving 600 plate appearances to? Oh, just Cal Raleigh and William Contreras. And then you think about, okay, I'm going to be fine with a Will Smith, Kyle Teal connection, right? Well, that's 900 plate appearances. I just got 600 from my guy. So if I get 400 or 500 from my second guy, I'm going to get 200 more plate appearances than you, and that's huge. So the difference between the top catchers and the bottom catchers is really big. I mean, if you go real cheap on the position and you're like Tyler Stevenson and Francisco Alvarez, you might get 800 plate appearances from both your catchers combined. And there's going to be a real chance that somebody can really blow you out of the water. So I've done some builds where I did the 2 top catchers. I've done some builds where I waited a little bit. But I will say the builds of the 2 top catchers, I feel pretty good about my playing time on those teams.
Yeah, I think the discount's a really nice one in 2 catcher leagues for William Contreras for the reasons you mentioned. I think the average being really good at a position where a lot of guys tend to lag. On top of that, playing time weight ends up being huge. It just drives that floor up. The ceiling could be that of like a $27 to $30 player in a good year for Contreras. Clearly an important part of how that lineup is built in Milwaukee. And I think there's the possibility of an extension, but more likely than not, they're just going to keep pushing him very hard and then move him in the year before he reaches free agency. That's mostly the template in Milwaukee. And Contreras would have been a pretty good fit on the roster that I built on Monday night. The mixed league labor draft, as I talked about, 15 teams. I had the number 7 pick, which I don't like. You like being more in the middle. I prefer an end, and everyone likes picking first. But even for me, I'd rather be in the 15 spot than in 7 or 8. You can see the full results with the link in the show description. The first kind of big decision tree thing I had to decide on was, do I want one of the starting pitchers in Skubal or Skeens if someone in front of me takes Tarek Skubal, or do I want a foundational bat in the first round? We've talked about this a few times, just in the sense of like, when you're thinking about what your roster is likely to do, you want to think about the first 4 to 5 rounds at least. Who is likely going to be there? What are your strengths and weaknesses going to be? The main thing for me is I don't really love the idea of Yamamoto or Christopher Sanchez with that second round pick. Anything could happen between rounds 2 and 3 with 12 picks between my turns. So the way I thought about it was I absolutely wanted an ace. I wanted a guy that projects to be worth more than $40 in this format, because I felt like I could get maybe 2 late first round bats maybe in rounds 2 and 3 if things broke my way.
And it turns out you were right. If you didn't want Yamamoto, he went right before you in round 3. And when you didn't take a pitcher in the second round, when you took Nick Kurtz, the beginning of the third round was Sanchez, Gilbert, Brown, Yamamoto. So like you taken any of the guys that you might have liked. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe you liked Hunter Brown, or maybe you liked Christopher Sanchez in the third, but they wouldn't have been there for you. So then if you had not taken a pitcher and you wanted to have a top pitcher, you would have been like, oh, I need to jump Chris Sale or Logan Webb or Brian Wu. Sale and Wu have real health concerns, and I know that you're not enamored with Webb's strikeout rate. So for you, I think you did the right thing. I am intrigued by this Yordan Alvarez in the third. I've just done that in a couple leagues, and it just makes me nervous because of what we talked about with Chandler Rome. But he puts together 130, 140 innings, and what you've got coming out of the first 3 rounds is at least, I would say a plus batting average altogether, and a chance at 70 homers from 2 guys.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in the foundation that I've run into a couple times. The first is that I seem to want to steer away from Ronald Acuna Jr. for some reason when I'm in the earlier half of the round. If I were sitting at 11 or 12 and I'm looking at him compared to Gunnar or someone like that, I'd probably take Acuna then. I've got both Julio Rodriguez and I think Kyle Tucker consistently ahead. I've got Ellie ahead of Acuna too, though. Like I've had that choice before. I've just taken Ellie, and that's in situations with the overall components where you're trying to compete against more than just the people in your league. And I think with Ellie, the stolen bases to me are just a little safer than they are with Acuna, even though I think Acuna is going to run a lot. I think he's still going to be a great kind of player. Something about 2 ACL tears is freaking me out and steering me away with a foundational player. But the Kurtz-Alvarez combo does give me that power plus average base. And I think what that did is it put me in this weird position where I knew I was going to have to choose a little bit differently with some of the middle round guys I've been going after. Like I didn't want to throw away the average cushion I built. I wanted to kind of bully batting average a little bit. So it took a few guys away, like Willie Adames and Dansby Swanson, some of the discounted shortstops that I usually lean on if I wait at that position were really not great fits for what I was going to do. And it forced me to go after guys like Geraldo Perdomo and Jeremy Pena. I think the weird pick I made was in round 6 with Drake Baldwin. I like Baldwin because I think there's some similarities to what William Contreras brings to the table, but he's not going to play as much as William Contreras does. It'd be a shock to me if Baldwin got to 600 plate appearances this year.
There's something that's coming off this board for me is that, rounds 5 through 9 or 10 maybe even are not actually a great place to try and fix a stolen base issue.
I learned that the hard way, yes.
Isn't that weird? Because here's the guys that you passed on. You passed on Randy Arozarena for Drake Baldwin, and I just in terms of quality of player and the fact that Randy Arozarena could give you a 200 average when you're trying to keep your average up, I think you made the right choice there, honestly. You passed on. You mentioned Story, but Story is just such a health risk. I'd rather have Jeremy Pena. I'd rather have the younger guy. I'm not seeing a lot. Oneil Cruz, you could have jumped him. You could have taken Oneil Cruz instead of Tyler Glasnow, but at that point, you had waited a long time for your second pitcher.
Right, and I thought if I drafted Skubal, I want to also make sure I'm doing well with ratios. So that made me take some innings risk on. But the whole point of taking a pitcher in the first is to dominate ERA and WHIP, right? You want to be really good in those categories if you're going to commit that kind of draft capital to start your roster.
But you did take Mizorowski next, and I guess that's a fair question. At least that's the one toggler I could say. Well, I don't know. You didn't have an outfielder yet. And Oneil Cruz is going to give you need stolen bases, but I've listed, between 5 and 10, I've listed the best guys that could have helped you fix. I mean, Luke Keeschel, I think, was a little bit of a high draft pick for him. Michael Harris, you could have taken Michael Harris instead of Jeremy Pena. And you could have taken, you would have had to take Jarren Duran over Geraldo Perdomo. So, that's it. I mean, I've listed most of the guys that you could say, ooh, I'm behind on stolen bases. So I would just say, if you are in this position where you've gone heavy power, just fix the steals later. Don't panic. And I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying, take guys who have a little bit of steals. I think the Perdomo, Pena, that's great. Collect some steals. Keep it in your mind you need steals. I think you did fine with the sort of Evan Carter, Colton Cowser, even Cam Smith. A lot of those guys are going to steal bases, and you got them later. There happens to be a lot of, I've noticed this from draft and hold season, happens to be a lot of lefty guys with speed that are weird fits for weekly leagues, but you can still play around with it. Most weekly leagues, you can put batters in for Friday for the weekend and for the beginning of the week. So if you have 3 lefties like Lowe, Carter, and Cowser, you can play games where you're just playing 2 of them at any given time. And that you can bring your batting average up, and you can get to basically 2020 seasons using these 3. You can produce 2 2020 seasons with an okay batting average using 3 players. And that's been it's been something I've done late in drafts. I also like, the Melton late dart for you, which is was that a bench round, so that you can just keep him there and maybe he makes the team.
Yeah, round 28, right? The what could go right sort of dart. If he doesn't make the team, if he gets optioned to AAA, then he's off my roster at the first waiver run. Yeah, so I mean, I'm still lighter than I'd like to be in speed, but also getting out of the mindset of the no trade, no IL league. Other teams have imbalances, so if I'm a little heavy on power, I can move some power or some starting pitching most likely to either get a reliable second source of saves or to get more steals. And I think the way my team is built, I'll feel fine giving away, Taylor Ward if someone wants power, or Andy Pages if someone wants a more balanced outfielder for someone that runs even more. I can move some things around pretty easily with the way this was built. The other kind of silly thing that I did that I think can work in a 15-team league with twice weekly lineup changes is I really didn't have an everyday second and third baseman that I'm sure about. Jorge Polanco, because of his injury history, and Max Muncy the round before that, being kind of a big side platoon guy. I think you could see either one of those spots being problematic for different reasons. So what I did is I actually grabbed Brett Beatty and Colt Keith, guys that have second and third base eligibility, guys that mix and match a little bit based on matchups. And I'm just hoping that for any given segment of the schedule, the versatility I have, that I've got a combination of guys that will actually exceed expectations, basically 4 guys to cover 3 roster spots between second, third, and middle corner. Like I'll use one of those guys in one of those spots every week too. So I think that it's a little bit of a trial balloon for me because I don't always wait that long to address those positions, but I think I may have come out of it okay because of how the lineups work in this league.
I mean, that's the other version of the sort of Cowser, Josh Lowe, Evan Carter gambit. And then, one last thing I would say is just know yourself, know what you're good at, and know your format to the point where, I did a draft where this past weekend, the barf draft, where I ended up with Kenley Jansen, Robert Stevenson, and Gregory Soto as my saves situation in a 15-team league. That's not ideal. I don't like that. But I feel like that I have a pretty good approach when it comes to getting saves off the wire. And, can I get 30 saves or 25 saves from Jansen and then another 30 saves off the wire? I feel like yes. So my team projections won't project that well when everyone looks at the tracker. The pitching tracker will say I have worse saves than everybody else and this and that. But I feel like I've built a team that is ready for me to go to work on during the season. So if you have a waiver wire, you have that as an asset, you should say to yourself, what have I traditionally been able to find on the waiver wire? And that comes down to power and speed too, because people say they find speed on the waiver wire. They say they find power. I say that you actually just find some playing time on the waiver wire, and it's really hard to find either power or speed on the wire. If I had to guess, I would say it's a little bit easier to find speed on the wire because defensive replacements that come in for injured guys are often speedy, multi-utility guys that can steal you a couple bags. So anyway, all ripe for research, but also just personal introspection. What have I been able to find on the wire in the past? What have I been able to trade for? What kind of trades have I been actually able to pull in the past? And so load up on those things and leave room for growth in other ways.
Yeah, I think that's part of why I pushed starting pitching a little bit harder in the middle rounds too. You and I have talked about maybe that pick 200 to 300 range overall, not having quite as many sleeper-ish, undervalued pitchers that we love. I think once you get past about pick 300, that's when guys I like start to show up again. So I wanted to create a bit of a donut. I wanted to go heavy with pitching with Glasnow, Mizorowski in 8 and 9. Cam Schlittler fell to the 12th. I was really trying to address bats and was like, that's too much of a discount. I got to take that. And then I got that Snell discount I mentioned earlier in the 13th, where I might have, at any given point, 3 of 5 of the top 30 pitchers in the league. Like, that's a possibility. That's probably too much with Skubal being one of them. So I will, with health, almost certainly end up trading a starting pitcher to cover up at least one of my other categorical deficiencies. But I think it came together okay, all things considered. There were a few moments where it looked pretty hairy. I did drop a chat, set up a channel in the Discord for the draft on Monday night. It's kind of fun to just do that and share the process, answer questions along the way. So I may do that again with another draft or two before we get to opening day. We are going to go. As a reminder, this draft board will be available in the show description. Conversation continues on Discord. Thanks again to Chandler Rome for joining us earlier today to discuss the Astros. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.